Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. وَمَن يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. Sadaqallahu al-Azim. In a pre-industrial era, people would evaluate their happiness on a whole host of things. So their lifestyles, their families, their children, their livestock. The Industrial Revolution changes all of that. Suddenly, you've got access to jobs, you've got factories, you've got mills, you've got industries building up around you. You've got the steam engine. So if you wanted, you can go down to Brighton, and now if you wanted, you can go up to Scotland. So suddenly, options open up. This change in the Industrial Revolution brings a fixation on money. People's happiness is no longer compared to what they used to compare it to in the past. They become fixated on money. Then we had the dot-com revolution. And this is a very modern, recent event. It's an event which changes millionaires into billionaires. And it shows the shopkeeper who sat on a street. Your customer isn't the only one, isn't the one who lives down the road, but actually you've got an access to a global market. People suddenly become rich. All of this wealth drives an obsession with money. This is fueling greed. This is fueling a real sense of selfishness within the people. And there's been sociological studies that have suggested that as people increase in terms of their wealth, they become less empathetic or sympathetic towards the poor. There's changing viewpoints. These are definitely proven points. And actually, this might be one of the reasons that the Prophet ﷺ really resented wealth. And he actually lived his life wanting the exact opposite of that. That's why if you read about him, you'll find that the Prophet ﷺ said, Allahumma ahyini miskinan. Oh Allah, give me the life of a poor man. Wa amitni miskinan. Ya Allah, give me the death of a poor man. Wa wahshurni fi zumratil masaki. Ya Allah, when you raise me on the day of judgment, raise me in the company of the poor. Why would it not be? Because the Prophet ﷺ for us is the ultimate selfless man. Isn't he the Prophet who lived his life saying, Ummati, Ummati, oh Lord, my nation, my nation. He died saying, Ummati, Ummati. This is absolute selflessness. Primary concern, my nation, my nation. He says on the day of judgment when I'm resurrected, still my primary concern is Ummati, Ummati, my nation, my nation. The Prophet ﷺ was absolutely, totally selfless. So much so that there's a narration. Sayyidina Abu Umama radiallahu ta'ala anhu reported that an angel came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, O Messenger of God, Allah Almighty says, if you want, I will turn this mountain next to you into gold. And the resentment of wealth is captured right there at that moment where he says, La ya Rabbi. He says, no, my Lord, don't turn it into gold. Instead, he says, Inni uhibbu an ashba'a yawman wa aji'a yawman. He says, Ya Allah, I love the idea. I absolutely love the idea that I eat satiated one day, but that I starve the next. I actually love that. He says, because the day that I'm starving, I feel vulnerable and desperate. When I get desperate, oh God, I turn to you. I think of you. I remember you. I beg you. And then, Ya Allah, you bestow to me. And when you give me something and I get to eat satiated again, I remember to thank you. I remember to praise you. I remember to show my gratitude. That's what I want. And he never ever wanted wealth. He was totally selfless. In fact, he was so selfless that nobody ever needed to ask him for anything if they so much as indicated. So it hit past him and said, oh, Messenger of God, that looks really nice. And he would say, and you shall have it. So if you so like it, it is yours. This was the Messenger ﷺ. There's actually a report where a companion, the Prophet ﷺ, wears this beautiful new cloak. And he comes out and sits amongst his companions. And one companion says, oh, Messenger of God, that cloak is beautiful. Can I not have it? And everybody's telling him off. Well, what on earth are you doing? If you just simply had said that you liked it, he would have said, and it is you. And he did what he did. The Prophet ﷺ said, look, you asked, so it is yours. And then he went back and he folded it and sent it over to him. And other companions said, why on earth would you have done that? He said, the only reason I did that because this cloak has touched the body of the Prophet ﷺ, and I want this to be the very cloak that becomes my shroud that is wrapped around me on the day that I die. Companions say that actually he was shrouded in that when he was buried. But this is the Prophet ﷺ, totally selfless. And he taught that to his companions. Say that Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she says that there was never 3 days in our life as wives of the Prophet in our households. There were never 3 days in our life where we ate satiated. And she said it's not because of poverty. It's not that we didn't have anything. She actually reported, وَلَوْ شِئْنَا لَشَبِعْنَا. If we wanted, every day we could have eaten until we were absolutely full. وَلَكِنْ نُؤْثِرُ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِنَا. But we always favored others. Somebody would come knocking on our door and say, is there something to eat? And whilst we were eating, we'd just give our food away. I mean, this is the selfless Prophet and his selfless companions. In fact, there's a beautiful story, really beautiful story, that in the time of poverty and in the time of hardship, one of the companions gets a gift from something of the sheep. It was some meat or something, and he gets this gift, and this is a real delicacy. I mean, if you think that these people didn't have white flour and didn't have bread to eat, meat was out of the question. It wasn't even in the equation. So when this companion receives it, he's starving, his family is starving, they're going through desperation. But he thinks about his neighbor, and he says to his family, I know that we're starving, but do you know that our neighbor is also struggling? So could we be brave enough to just give our food to them, and we'll survive, Allah will still provide to us. And the family agreed. And so they picked up that food and gave it to the neighbor. When they gave it to the neighbor looks at his neighbor and says, well, I'm starving, but my neighbor's starving. And actually he gives it to his neighbor. So every neighbor passes it to the neighbor. This happens through 7 households. It goes from house to house to house. And eventually it does a full circle and it comes back round to the guy who initially gave it to his neighbor. And Allah Almighty smiles upon this. He smiles down upon his people and he says, you see, look, these are the good. وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. Do you see how they favor others over themselves, even if they're starving themselves? And they're there at that point. He says, وَمَنْ يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ. Whosoever is able to contain his own selfishness, فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. They are the ones that are ultimately successful. And so as a result of this, the Prophet ﷺ, he wove selflessness into the fabric of your faith, which is why he expressed in a hadith, مَا آمَنَ بِي مَنْ بَاتَ شَبْعَانَ. A person hasn't believed in me if he has spent a night satiated, he's eaten to his full. وَجَارُهُ جَاعِئٌ إِلَى جَنْبِهِ وَهُوَ يَعْلَمُ بِهِ. Whilst meanwhile his neighbor living nearby has gone to sleep hungry and he's aware of it. This is your faith. And so when we go into months of Ramadan, we should remind, every single year we should remind ourselves, there is the letter of the law and there's the spirit of the law. The letter of the law is that you as human beings abstain from everything that you've been told to avoid in that month of Ramadan. That is the letter of the law. The spirit of the law in Ramadan is that you be feeding others. And because the best of humanity, this is what we heard, the best, khairun nas anfa'un nas, the best of all people are the ones who are most beneficial. And the beneficial person starts becoming beneficial when he becomes selfless.